If you're looking for the biggest drop possible with a lowering spring for your 2005 to 2010 V6, look no further than the Eibach Sport lines. Now these springs will drop your early S197 V6 just over 1.5 inches up front and a whopping 2 inches in the rear, while the progressive rate spring will maintain a relatively comfortable on-road driving experience. Now your price point for the Eibach will be in the mid $200 range, while the install will get a middle of the road 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter from me, with a little bit more detail to come later in the video. So the Sport lines are and have always been my go-to choice for the Mustang owners out there who want to go low no matter what generation we're talking about. And that's because they consistently offer the biggest drop out of any spring in the category, and that certainly is the case here when we're talking about the 2005 to 10 4-liter V6. Now there are a lot of other spring options that will come close to matching Eibach's 1.6-inch drop for the front, but where the Sport lines really differ is the massive 2-inch drop in the rear, which on average is at least a 1/2 inch bigger than some other springs you will encounter on the site for your V6. And this tells us two things. One, your car will obviously be low, and two, the big drop in the rear will make for a more leveled look overall, eliminating some of that nose down rake, which some people might like, while others might prefer that old school muscle car nose down stance. But regardless of what kind of stance you prefer, that big drop will certainly improve your all-around appearance by eliminating that ugly 4x4 stance, along with that wheel gap, which, let's be honest, can sometimes make or break the entire car. But lowering your car will also improve other areas of your Mustang's performance, thanks to that lower center of gravity and the firmer spring rate. Now the car should feel a little bit more confident in turns, less body roll, shouldn't really nosedive too hard when you're really standing on the brakes, and shouldn't squat as hard when you're leaving the line under hard acceleration. And speaking of spring rates, the Sport lines here do feature what is called a progressive spring rate, and I think that's something you'll find with a majority of the aftermarket springs within the category. Now the deal here, gang, is that these springs will progressively firm up the harder they are compressed. This way you are getting a softer, a little bit more comfortable initial spring rate for the daily driving out there, but once you start hitting those corners a little bit harder, you'll start engaging those firmer spring rates, reducing the body roll in the process. Specifically, V6 owners will be looking at a rate varying from 126 pounds to 274 pounds for the front spring, while the rears will range from 80 pounds to 240 pounds respectively. Now Eibach also includes some new bump stops, as you guys can see here, along with some brand new dust covers for the front. So yes, you are going to be paying a little bit more for the Eibach initially compared to some other springs in the category, but you are getting some small little extras as well, in addition, of course, to that trusted Eibach reputation. Now there are a couple of things to consider here. First and foremost, throwing this aggressive of a drop or a spring on the stock high mileage shocks and struts is a recipe for disaster, at least in my humble opinion. The ride quality will certainly not be enjoyable, and I can almost guarantee you will blow out your factory dampers over time or after a few thousand miles, as the stock stuff really wasn't designed to operate with a firmer spring in addition to that slammed ride height. So with all that said, you might want to consider checking out an aftermarket set of shocks and struts before installing the Sport lines. Or you can totally roll the dice, install this on the stock stuff. In fact, some of our customers have and had some good results, but ultimately that is up to you. Now, in addition to the shock and strut debate, I would also strongly recommend looking into a set of caster camber plates, or at least camber bolts, to help you get everything back into spec up front. As for the rear, because you are dropping it 2 inches back there, you'll certainly want to entertain an adjustable panhard bar, because more than likely your axle will shift to one side after you lower the car with the factory non-adjustable panhard bar still in place. The adjustable option will just simply give you the ability to center that rear axle after the car has been lowered. Let's quickly shift gears and talk about the install, and you're going to be looking at a middle of the road 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter here, maybe a few hours to a half a day in the shop or garage, depending on your experience level and just how fast you like to work. Now, tool list will be pretty lengthy, but will include things like a full socket set, a few open-ended wrenches, jack and jack stands of course, or a lift if you're lucky, and then finally a spring compressor to help you with the fronts. And speaking of the fronts, they will be the more time-consuming part of the install, at least in my opinion, as that strut assembly will need to be removed from the car completely in order to swap springs using your spring compressor. Now the rears will just simply involve supporting the rear axle, dropping the sway bar, and removing the lower shock bolts, which will in turn allow the rear end to sag enough to remove the factory springs and then install the new Eibach Sport lines. As always guys, it's never a bad idea to get your alignment checked out after doing an install like this to make sure everything looks good and again is within spec. So wrapping this one up, if you're all about that low life with your V6 and you don't want to fork out the big money to grab a set of coilovers or air ride, you'll certainly want to check out the Eibach Sport lines right here at AmericanMuscle.com.